A very warm welcome back to today's aviation news recap. From coverage on Boeing set to pay a pretty considerable fee to another rival aircraft manufacturer, to a route expansion and a new aircraft entering service. Why not begin with the Airbus A321neo, which has formally entered service with KLM after delivery occurred around a month ago. The new aircraft type, the Netherlands-based company, completed successful flights to Copenhagen, Berlin and Stockholm during its first day of active operations. KLM has confirmed that adding the A321neo is part of an overarching commitment to enhancing the fleet with, you guessed it, bringing in more efficient aircraft types. The more efficient flying, as you could say, does circle back to KLM's core future focus, which includes a greener, cleaner operation, while also making sure that the aircraft they're flying on a daily basis into airports which do have local communities surrounding them are quieter, and that is what next generation aircraft are capable of doing for your respective airline in question. A mid-September EIS does perfectly align with what KLM expected upon taking delivery of the first unit. As more A321neos join the fleet, KLM is committed to bringing the next generation aircraft to more locations, such as Paris, Prague and Vienna are the locations for the type that have already been outlined. While revamping the fleet and giving it obviously a fresh look to operations across several new routes to begin with, we also know the A321neo will help replace the Boeing 737. Not only does the Neo have a larger capacity than the Boeing single aisle, but it also offers improvements right across the board. These improvements are no shock when considering the development of technology that has been adopted in a type like the A321neo over a much older 737NG. That is just the natural progression we see from aircraft to aircraft. KLM says the A321neo is 21% more efficient in terms of overall fuel usage than the outgoing 737, this measured by per passenger ton kilometers. The Neo is also equipped with some of the latest technologies inside. Now this includes USB-C charging ports, a mobile and tablet holder, and more spacious luggage bins. Over to the next story, and obviously I'd probably argue to you the headline one. After much formality, Boeing has officially agreed to pay the sum of USD 150 million to Embraer, a Brazilian aircraft manufacturer, as part of a settlement. Now, this occurred a couple of weeks ago, and I'll just have to once again say that I apologize for the lateness in getting this story out. I'm actually currently out of office at the time this video is going live, and I didn't want you to have no content for, say, 2 weeks, so I have been, in the last few weeks, diligently working ahead to make sure content was still released, with the knowledge that sometimes these topics you may have already heard about. Again, I can only sincerely apologize, just doing my best though to have something out there for you. But back to the story at hand. Such a settlement follows the earlier termination of a proposed tie-up in the late 2010s, which was to see Boeing attain part of the Brazilian manufacturer as a core asset. The agreement collapsed in 2020, and since then we have seen the duo embark on a long-winded process regarding how the payout will work as essentially a termination fee. In principle, the deal was valued initially at over USD 4 billion and would have seen Boeing buy the entirety of Embraer's commercial aircraft division specifically. Now, Embraer produces other aircraft. Boeing were really just focusing in on that commercial division. Such a prospective purchase would have seen Boeing get access to the popular E-Jet alongside many other assets to build upon. Think of it in a similar sense to Airbus taking on the C-Series, rebranding it as the A220, and enjoying some success there with broader adoption, maybe higher production standards, and leveraging their relationships to see more orders. Boeing would then likely be able to close the gap between itself and Airbus in an ideal world. In an ideal world being really important because arguments now with hindsight would point to the turmoil Boeing found itself in since such an agreement was tentatively announced and then cancelled, and how if a deal had progressed maybe how intended, alongside everything occurring with Boeing how it's done, the fate of the E-Jet could have been very different under Boeing's hands and could have just seemingly collapsed amid everything that's been going wrong. The termination, however, has equally been fascinating. Why? Well, because both parties seemingly felt like they were in a process of a divorce, arguing against each other for being the key reason of the demise of the deal. Embraer largely thought that Boeing's poor financial position by the time the 2020s arrived meant a deal proposed before it entered a crisis was no longer possible. However, in the case of Boeing, well, they believed that Embraer was simply not coming to the table regarding crucial closure conditions, which meant a deal ultimately wasn't feasible. Analysts at JP Morgan believe that the cash received from Embraer on the part of Boeing was actually below overall expectations. Now, those expectations came in anywhere between 300 to 400 million, and obviously this payout is at around 150 million. While there may be disappointment in the overall figure, and this was definitely reflected in the share price of Embraer that fell throughout that day, there are still many positives for this manufacturer as we continue to move into 2024. The company has progressed quite significantly, might I add, across many markets, and we've seen greater adoption of the E-Jet, and now Embraer wants to build on that for future success. The proposed Boeing tie-up now also has a little bit of closure and can be seen as a minor blip in the road, but Embraer has far greater ambitions outlined for the future, and I do feel they're going to be a fascinating manufacturer to watch long into the future and see how they really develop into key sectors. Today's final story does focus in on Jetstar in Australia, a much more quieter way to end the video, who have announced that they will be expanding in 2025. They're flying to New Zealand with the launch of 3 new flights. 2 of those will originate from the Gold Coast, with Jetstar aircraft departing for Hamilton and Dunedin in June, and then we'll also see 1 from Sydney. JQ189-190 will operate between the Gold Coast and Dunedin. Meanwhile, on the 18th of June, we will see the commencement of flights between Gold Coast and Hamilton. Focusing in now just on that Sydney service, that'll commence 16th of June and operate between Sydney and Hamilton, operating on Mondays, Tuesdays, Thursdays, and Saturdays. Almost 200,000 annual low-cost seats will now be sold as the airline focuses in on critical hotspots for the winter season, and obviously those that are massive holiday hotspots. New Zealand remains Australia's largest international visitor market, shock horror there, and Jetstar wants to increase its overall trans-Tasman connectivity. Gold Coast will be one of the better connected airports, funnily enough, for Australia when considering flights to New Zealand, and while a lot of focus is obviously placed on passengers, as this is the sole responsibility of Jetstar, there will also be a importance on overall air freight, and when we're taking a look at passengers, this could range from business, visitors to students, and the tourism aspect of Queensland really relying on visitors from New Zealand. Well, these additional flights are fantastic, and again, to confirm, they'll commence in June of 2025. That'll conclude today's aviation recap. Thank you very much for your support here on the channel. Please take care, be safe, and I'll see you tomorrow for your latest industry news. And we'll fly.